one of the things that I found out about UK culture that I didn't realise when I was in the UK, and only discovered when I came here and actually was viewing that culture from the outside, is how it sort of denigrates people who want to actually pursue something, pursue success. So, for example, when I would tell people that I wanted to write in the UK, they would say, well, you know, it's really hard to be an author, the chances of it succeeding are really minimal, you're never going to get published, this kind of thing. Yeah? So it was very, very much sort of an anti writing or getting started type culture. I came out here, and after I'd started dating for a bit from the lady who became my wife, I confessed my secret to her, which was, you know, I want to start writing, and she gave me the typical great Hong Kong answer: you want to write? Write. So I did, and the first thing I wrote a couple of short stories to get myself kicked off. But I think the real thing which gave me the impetus to go on and try a novel was when I won a short story competition. It was run by the Standard newspaper here, and it was a short story called Dispute Resolution. It was set against the background of the Beijing Olympics then. And I entered it thinking nothing of it, but it won first prize, and I thought, well, having done that, really I've got to have a go now at a novel, because I'm a great reader of novels. I love reading what a lot of people would class as, you know, trashy novels or thrillers, but I love them. I view them as important as literature. It's what I read all the time, so I thought I really want to have a go at that. So I did, and the result of that was my first novel, which is this one, Article 109. This one, yes. This is the first one, Article 109, which was it became published by Proverse because it won the Proverse Prize in 2011. It was the winner of that, and the Proverse Prize is an example of that Hong Kong can-do kind of mentality you get out here. It offers the opportunity for writers to get published, and in the same way that you don't have that kind of opportunity in the country that I'm originally from. So it was great to enter it, it was great to win, and it was great to see it on the shelves. What is it about? Well, it is it's a legal thriller, and it is about a chap called Scott Lee, who is a lawyer, and he is one day approached by the family of one of his former colleagues, a girl called Kimmy Yang, who has unfortunately committed suicide, and the family wants Scott to investigate the reasons behind her suicide. So Scott does start to investigate, and as he gets drawn more and more into the investigation, he slowly uncovers that maybe it wasn't a suicide, and underlying the reasons why Kimmy died is actually quite a sinister conspiracy involving, that goes to the very highest echelons of Hong Kong society, and brings into question the future of Hong Kong. It's called Article 109 because it's based on Article 109 in the Basic Law, which is the constitution that we have in Hong Kong. And you know, this is where my legal background comes in. Constitutions for me are one of the most fascinating legal documents you get. They form the basis for countries, they form the basis for societies. And the one we have in Hong Kong is one of the most elegant constitutions, I think, which exists in the world. And Article 109 in that constitution is utterly unique. You will never see a provision like that in any other constitution in the world. And what it says is that the government must always maintain Hong Kong as an international finance centre. And now, as we saw in 2008, actually governments don't have much say in whether a place is an international finance centre or not. So the whole basis of the conspiracy is that if you can undermine a provision in the basic law, you can undermine the whole basis for the country as well. So that's really Article 109, and it is set in Hong Kong, I would say, in about 2006, 2007, I would say. That kind of period where you're looking at about 10 years after the handover, but before a lot of things have happened, because actually Hong Kong's history is quite very interesting. You know, 97, you get the handover. Hong Kong, being a British colony, was handed back to China. But for about 10 years, the Chinese didn't really touch Hong Kong. They let it run as it was before the handover. And so Article 109 is set at the very end of that, before about 2010, when the Chinese started using Hong Kong as an asset. And so it's a very different time it was set into to what we see probably now in Hong Kong society. It did quite well, this book. It was number one, DYMOCKS on DYMOCKS #1 list for a couple of weeks. It's actually quite apt to be in one of the last DYMOCKS bookshops in Hong Kong. It's very sad that DYMOCKS have sort of exited Hong Kong in the way that they did. You know, it was kind of a bit of a proud moment for me to see it up there in the SCMP when it was number one in those days. So that's Article 109. Like I talk about the devil you know. Okay, yeah. So that was Scott Lee in Article 109, and I felt that Scott Lee needed a second outing, and because just what I've been talking about there, Hong Kong society has really moved on since about 2007, where China started to use Hong Kong more for its own devices, and economically that was brilliant. We saw Hong Kong becoming the first offshore renminbi centre, which gave a massive boost to the banking industry here. We saw a lot of Chinese companies coming down and listing here on the stock exchange, and really using the Hong Kong as the kind of like testing ground for exposure to international investment. But we also saw a kind of this cultural clash brewing between, if you like, the local Hong Kong culture, which you know, was people who'd kind of been grown up in the 90s, who had really been grown up and been educated on a Western diet of capitalism and democracy, which at its heart puts the individual first and the individual rights, and thinks society should be organised around individual rights, that's the best way to stimulate entrepreneurialism and grow the economy, versus the kind of Chinese version of capitalism, which is very much steeped in collectivist principles, that they sort of try to marry up capitalism with the kind of old-style Confucianist principles, which puts the collective above the individual and stability above everything else. And we saw this growing tension between these, some would say, irreconcilable different cultures coming to fruition, again clashing over a provision of the Basic Law. This time it was Article 45, the mechanism for electing the chief executive, where essentially those who have grown up in Hong Kong, steeped in the kind of Western diet of capitalism and democracy, want more of a free choice to choose whoever they want to be chief executive, as opposed to China, who wants a more controlled process. And they were suggesting that there would be this nominating committee for nominating who can stand as chief executive, and they'd select 2 people, and then they would let the people of Hong Kong choose between the 2 people they'd already chosen. And this clash really erupted in 2014 with the umbrella movement, umbrella protest, umbrella revolution, some of them called, which we saw on our streets here. I remember sitting at home with Isa when, on September the 29th, which was when the umbrella protest really blew up into something really big. That was the day where it all changed, where the tear gas was used for the first time by the Hong Kong police on the local population, since the first time, I think, since 1967, the riots. And so I viewed that through local Hong Kong eyes by seeing the reaction of Isa. Isa was in tears when that happened, and she just had to go down there. She just had to go down and say, that's not on, that's too much. No matter what your views on democracy are or whatever, that's not what you do. You've crossed a Rubicon. And so she did. She went straight down. I looked after Luke at the time. And for me, so I saw that reaction, and then I myself went down a couple of days later after the police had backed off, and this was the time where Hong Kong was top of the news cycle. Yeah, it was like the Brexit now. You couldn't turn on the BBC but for seeing Hong Kong there. And the protesters had effectively won the propaganda campaign at that time. They were tiding the streets, and the students were being, Hong Kong was being portrayed as this wonderful place where, you thought for a moment things were going to change there. And I went down and I, met some of the students, and it changed my attitude completely to a lot of things. Because having met some of this, it was about the time I'd taken Luke was going through his kind of education interviews at that time. You've seen how old my son was, he's a kid man there. So he was kind of 2 years old at the time. And he'd been to more interviews in his life at that point. Have a seat, Nick. He'd been to more, so my son, he was 2 years old, he'd been to more school interviews in his life by the time he was 2 years old than I'd been to in my entire life. So I was really down on the education system here. I thought it was a system which just really taught rote learning and, drummed the imagination out of students. But having been down that night, I realized how wrong I was. The education system here does not drum creativity out of students. If anything, it puts a lid on it. And as soon as they get out of school, it kind of explodes. And what we saw was the result of this explosion, this creativity where, and what they'd done was amazing. They out-strategized the police. They had got this logo, this umbrella logo, which had gone ballistic all over the internet, all over Facebook, and they produced a logo which had achieved brand recognition for what they were trying to achieve the world over. And I thought, God, I should get our HR here, and we should hire these students now. And I thought, what if somebody did that? What if a chief executive just hired them all now? What would it mean for the movement? in 5 years, 10 years' time. And that gave me the plot of my book. And that's really, what this is about. So Scotland is back. It's set in Hong Kong right around now, actually, or right around the next chief executive election. So I won't say more than that about this book. I really enjoyed writing both books. I don't know. I can't choose which one I enjoyed writing more. But for me, writing is it's both a passion and a frustration, because it's kind of a need. You sort of, when you don't write for a long time, you feel you need to write something. You need to go back and do it, and you're back to those very early mornings before you go to work doing it. But whilst it's an exhausting and frustrating experience, it's just also a wonderful experience as well, and gives you a chance to, explore your mind to its limitations. So those are the two books. So I guess a lot of people sort of would ask authors, how do you come up with ideas? I've never had any problem with that. The problem is the reverse. I have too many ideas, and it's kind of, centering on the one that you want to, you want it to become your obsession for the next few years as you write the book. Yeah. So I think the way I do it, Jova, is once I've come up with the idea and I throw it around in my head for a bit, and if I think it's got legs and if it's something that I really want to take forward, then I start trying with a very basic, what we call a treatment, or an outline. And an outline is trying to take that idea and turn it into a skeleton plot, maybe about 10 pages long, right? So, and that 10 pages, then that becomes, if you like, your first draft of the book. And that process can take a while. Yeah, well, it's a bit of both, because I said at the beginning that I read a lot. Yeah, I read a lot of, especially fiction in this genre. Yeah. So and a lot of what I read is by authors who are far more successful than myself. Yeah. And so they are multi-world bestsellers. So what I try and do is, if I have an idea and I've given it the treatment, then I benchmark that against, is this something that the readers of, say, a John Grisham or a Harlan Coben would like? Because that's what I like to read. Yeah? And the two should marry up, because I'm only going to write what I like to read. Yeah? It's a bit of both, because I write first and foremost because I'm a reader. So unless I'm going to be obsessed with the plot in the same way that I'm obsessed with a lot of what Harlan Coben or John Grisham writes, as soon as I start reading it, then I'm not going to, want to write it. So it has to be that same passion which draws me into one of those books, that draws me into writing a book. So how do I find the time? I don't sleep that much. I've always been. I have a bit of a, I think most authors must go through this, but they're the natural insomniacs. The mind is always going, and for me, writing is very much complementary to my day job, because a way of getting the stress out of your day job is to focus your mind on something completely, separate from it. And so it's very relaxing doing that. So it's kind of my way of you know, turning. If you can't switch the mind off, at least get it focused on something completely different from your work, and that gives you the
sort of medication.
Huh?
Sort of medication.
Sort of medication. It's either that or, you know, becoming an alcoholic, which is not probably not the best thing. I sort of came to the conclusion when writing the second book. I was, when you look at the government's reaction, and indeed society's reaction to the whole sort of umbrella movement, is that we must do something more for youth. We must mentor them more. We say, and the biggest, you know, soundbite you see, because the youth are our future. And there's something deeply wrong with that, in my view. We should not be saying, these guys are our future. We should be using them as assets now, because they've got a lot to give. We should be using them, you know, if they have this creativity, and we have spent all of our working years building up experience, putting the two together, you have essentially created probably the most powerful problem-solving dynamic at our disposal. And that, I think, is what a lot of people should be looking at, and what society should be doing now. No, that's a byproduct conclusion. You know, it's a work of fiction. So my primary aim of writing this book is to entertain. Yeah, it's to entertain readers. Yeah, and it's not. There are no. I like to think you won't be able to discover my own political beliefs from reading this book.
I noticed the book in the two books.
So you won't be able to discover it, because that's not the aim. They're not there to make a sort of political statement. They're just there purely to entertain. But of course, in researching it all, you know, I mean, that's another great byproduct of writing, in that it's a way to explore your own attitudes and form your own and sharpen your own opinions on things, and you know, maybe dig a little deeper into things that you ordinarily wouldn't do unless you were sort of having to write on the topic. I don't think so. Because I think there is as part of the genre, the legal thriller genre. You recall there was this sort of like spin-off genre from Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code, which was a little bit legal thrillerish in that it went into but I suppose almost historical thriller, where they go into the past and find these artifacts and these mysteries, and develop a wonderful plot from there. And there have been plenty of other books written on that, one of which I think was on the Declaration of Independence, you know, the provenance of that. And these documents, I think, they are of such fundamental importance and fundamental interest to people, that they because of what they stand for, they kind of match up everything, the economic development, the cultural development, and just the values and the rights of people, that they are the wonderful basis for any thriller plot, I think.
So perhaps you should find another article.
Yes, you know, I mean, I think the great thing with the basic law, it's such an elegantly written document, because it has to be a compromise. It had to be a kind of, it had to put off a lot of the arguments, and the election of the chief executive was one of the arguments it put off by the way that Article 45 was drafted. But yeah, I mean, the obvious one is the basic law is only in place for 50 years. And there has been a lot around in my brain about, you know, maybe that's kind of the basis for a third book as well. What happens to Hong Kong in 2047? will it still preserve the kind of separate rule of law and common law system that it has here, which is the selling point for it, or will it adopt the kind of mainland civil law system? I was very conscious of that when writing them. So there's a lot of context that I've put in there, and there was a lot of rewriting of that context, and that was one of the challenges of an author, because it's actually very difficult to do that and not make it like a boring. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And one of the things that I think works better when you're doing that is when you're doing it by having a conversation between the two characters, and they telling each other their experiences of what they were doing in the context of what you're trying to explain. So, for example, one of the protagonists in The Devil You Know is quite a feisty female journalist who her background, you only get to what her real background is about halfway through the book, but it turns out she's highly academic, got all the CV qualifications, but she's, you know, seemingly wasting her talents writing this blog and writing for lesser magazines. Yeah? So the question, and it sort of leaves the question why. You find out why later, because, and you know, without wishing to give too much away, it's because of her involvement in the umbrella movement. And so having that, when that comes out, that discussion between the two protagonists, Scott Lee and her, you see all that history come out in a way which I think was very married up with the plot and drove the plot as well. So hopefully it puts it in context, and you know, maybe it does sort of educate people outside who don't understand what is going on in Hong Kong about what happened here. Because I think one of the things which I think is that Hong Kong's just, it's the gift that keeps on giving as far as thriller writers are concerned. Because, you know, in any thriller, the setting is crucial. It's one of the three things which I think make a setting. One is plot, one is the characters, and the third is the setting. And the setting is almost like a character in its own right. And it mirrors either the values which the protagonist is fighting for, or what he's fighting against. I mean, you know, Raymond Chandler, for example, wrote, you know, the Big Sleep, all his Philip Marlowe novels wouldn't have been as good unless they were set against that kind of grubby Los Angeles background that he had. You know, Batman, you know, he has Gotham City. You know, it's the setting of it just defines Batman almost. And in Hong Kong, you've got a place which is a living and breathing contradiction. One country, two systems, communism, capitalism. You know, and you've got the most efficient transport system in the world, that, you know, coupled with some of these unbelievable inefficiencies which we all come up against now and again in Hong Kong. And it just creates a very, you know, wonderful place to create just a tense atmosphere around, which is the backing for perfect backing for anything.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you, Peter.